I get to introduce Delegate David Bulova, who was first elected to the 37th District in 2006. And as we discussed coming in, somebody snaked a line, and he's represented the JCCNV until this new district. But we still consider him a representative of JCCNV area. He has a professional background in environmental planning and serves on the Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources Committee, as well as General Laws and Education. And we welcome you once again.
Marvelous. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Does that work? Okay. It really is a pleasure to be here, and I'm assuming that I get Dave's lost time, right? Okay. Anyways, I really do appreciate the fact that you all have come out here, and I enjoy the dialogue, and I learn a lot from the questions. And I also appreciate the fact that so many of you come down to Richmond and take part of our public process. You know, depending on whether sequestration actually happens, this could be a very, very tough year. I guess it was about 3 weeks ago that we got word that Governor McDonnell had asked all agency heads to come up with a plan for how they would cut 4% across the board. And when we've been dealing with billions of dollars of cuts over the last 6 years because of the bad economy, you really are cutting into very, very core services. Not to mention the fact that we have a number of very big challenges ahead of us that are going to cost money. And a couple of those include the Department of Justice settlement that's resulting in shutting down our training centers and making sure that we're beefing up our community services for the disabled. We have a multi-$100 million effort to clean up the Chesapeake Bay that has to be done in 15 years under the EPA mandate. We are really falling behind on serving those with mental health issues, and there's a number of other structural issues that we need to be taking care of, such as our VRS system. And so sequestration couldn't come at a worse time for Virginia as we're starting to finally make a recovery. And so I hope that we're able to go ahead and take care of that on the federal level. As far as moving forward, you know, we're moving ahead with respect to jobs and the economy. That still needs to be our real focus. And there's two areas that are linked very directly with that. You know, number one is education, and you've heard a lot about education and the need to continue to fund that. And the other one, and it's related to that, is transportation, because we only got a limited funding pie. And so if you take money from the general fund for transportation, that ultimately winds up coming out of health care, winds up coming out of public safety, winds up coming out of education, and that's not a good thing. You know, I'm a little bit more optimistic about our chances for getting something through this year. I think this is a good year to do it, and I was very pleased. You know, I know that my Senator Peterson, who I share a lot of area with, introduced legislation, or is introducing legislation. But the big piece of legislation that's getting a lot of talk about is from a Republican, Senator John Watkins, a businessman, who understands that we can't continue to operate the way we are without it ultimately hurting our economy. And so I think it's a thoughtful plan, and I hope it's one that both sides of the aisle give due credence to. I also want to talk a little bit about health care. I serve on the Joint Health Care Commission. There's going to be a lot of focus on health care. The biggie is going to be on the Federal Health Care Act. On the exchange, I cannot for the life of me think of any circumstance where we would want to give up Virginia's obligation to do right by our citizens and to have the federal exchange ourselves. And with regard to the Medicaid expansion, I think it's not only the right thing to do, I also think it's the fiscally prudent thing to do. And you got to think about those folks who are going to be uninsured and how they're going to get health care. And they're going to use emergency services. They're not going to get preventative health care. Ultimately, that comes back and it costs all of us, and it's the most inefficient possible system that you could have. Just a little recap. Last year, I talked about some legislation that I was introducing on cramming, on human trafficking, on transportation. Human trafficking, you know, I know that's an issue that is near and dear to many people's hearts. I actually did get one through last year that I'm very proud of. We tightened up a lot of the penalties for human trafficking. What we were finding, though, is that we didn't have the tools to empower people to report human trafficking to the police. And so actually we now have a law that says that certain establishments have to post the National Human Trafficking Hotline so that you can anonymously report if you're being the subject of or if you think you've witnessed human trafficking. It's a program that's worked very, very well in Texas and other states. This year coming up, I'm planning on introducing bills to strengthen regional planning and to encourage regional cooperation. looking at ways to foster more innovation in our schools. There's a lot of focus on charter schools, but I think we really need to empower our public schools to figure out how they want to innovate. And finally, last but not least, many of you might have heard of the story over the summer about a young man who was killed by somebody who was texting and driving. The local judge said that he couldn't call that reckless because our penalties are so low in Virginia, and so I'm introducing legislation to change that and make sure you can at least charge somebody with reckless driving. As always, it's an exciting session. I'm looking forward to your comments.
Welcome to Delegate Mark Sickles. You have served the 43rd District since 2004. The district is in Franconia and extends through the southern part of Fairfax County, adjacent to Alexandria. Like Delegate Hugo, Mark has earned his party's confidence as Minority Caucus leader and also serves on the committees of Privileges and Elections, Health, Welfare and Institutions, and Agricultural, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources. And if you would desire to say a few things about what bills you're going to be working on this session or what you see in the future, that would be great.
To be honest, I really am behind a little bit with my job and everything, and I'm not as organized as my colleague here. He's my seatmate in Richmond, and also I was enjoying listening to his agenda because they're all things that I hope to support down there. I've been good, I can say, on your agenda, on the Jewish vote, when you bring down your issues to us. I think I'm 100%. I try to be. I think we have worked together on a lot of things. I've worked to make sure that our ban on stem cell research does not prohibit the funding of stem cell research from federal resources. We cannot use Virginia resources because of the language we had to agree to. I'm hoping that the General Assembly session is not as focused as much this year on social issues. I don't know if anyone's talked about that up to this time, but we made quite a splash last year across the country, and I think the things that we did last year had a national impact. I mean, there's a lot of things that went into this really bizarre year, starting over a year ago with the primaries and this just finished general election. But what we did we're the first legislature to start across the 50 states every year, and we really kicked it off well. And I think that the type of I think a lot of people around the country came to the Democratic side because of things they saw throughout the whole year. Anyway, I really am encouraged by the fact that there seems to be some acknowledgement that we have to put real resources into transportation, and we did pass a bill in 2007 that had real resources in it, and it was the meat of the bill was struck down by the Virginia Supreme Court, and our side, and under the leadership of Vivian Watts and Delegate Tom Rust and I think Delegate Albo and Delegate May, tried to fix that bill so it was a constitutional facsimile or version of the bill that was struck down, but that hasn't gone very well. So it's good to read in the paper that people want to put in bills that have real money in it, because our resources have been eroded by inflation over these it'll be 27 years coming up next year since the last time we did a major bill. I'm on the Health, Welfare and Institutions Committee, which will consider changes to Medicaid that will be stemming from the Affordable Care Act. Obviously, I support accepting the 100% money that the federal government is offering for the first 3 years, declining to 90%. And I just can't understand why, as the 7th wealthiest state in the nation, we would turn down money for our working poor and give it to states that are going to provide health care for their working poor. So I don't think that position against it is tenable and sustainable over time if it remains. But we do know the federal government has deep debt and deficit problems that they need to get their handle on. And, I think that's going to require trimming back some programs that have helped, maintain our senior citizen population in such a good, okay, I got to wrap up now. So anyway, we got big problems. We I hope to see you in Richmond. Come by and tell me what you need, and I'll try to do the best I can to help. And look forward to hearing from my senator, Adam Eben.